Again, I want to remind everybody that Monday night, there's no class, but next Wednesday night there is. Okay, we're in the middle of chapter 37. On the top is page Mem Zayin. At the bottom is page 170. We are in middle of the page. Okay, but now the Rebbe is saying over here is as follows. The ultimate purpose of creation of Dir B'Tachtenim is dependent on our action throughout the duration of Golus. And he says, why is that? Because when a person, and he explained, the reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah. What does that mean? The reward, not only the simple meaning you're going to be able to do, another mitzvah. The reward of a mitzvah is you are connected and bound to Hashem. Not only, Dr. Rebbe said, are you bound to Hashem, but all the physical objects that you used in the mitzvah, whether it's the wool for tzitzis or the parchment for tefillin, or the wax for the candles, or the oil for whatever it is, the physical object is being elevated because it was a kosher object, permissible object. It came from klipas noiga, and therefore you elevate it. And then the Alter Rebbe adds, and this is what we're in the middle of now. The power of your animal soul, when the Jew does a mitzvah, is also elevated when you do the mitzvah. So in other words, like this, when a Jew does a mitzvah, they elevate their worldly objects that they're doing the mitzvah with, plus they're elevating the kerch of the nefesh habamis that allows the hand to light the candles and to put on tefillin. Because again, if you're not a tzaddik, which none of us are, with all due respect, tzaddik of Tanya, then you're living from the animal soul. But when a person does a mitzvah, they're getting life from the godly soul going through the animal soul, because that's what gives us physical ability, life to do the mitzvah. So we're elevating the physical object. The godly soul was giving the life when we do the mitzvah. You give tzedakah. So your hand is putting money in the pushka. So that power is coming from the animal soul, but that moment you're getting your life from the godly soul. So you're elevating even the animal soul. And he says, even mitzvahs that are not physical. Okay, you know what? Let's start from there because that's what we're in the middle of now. Like 10 lines in the top of the page. And he says, the gam mitzvahs Talmud Torah, even the mitzvah of learning Torah. Kirshmu tefillah, saying the Shema or davening. Av she'ena basiya gam shias mamish. Even though you're not dealing with a physical object, it's all you. You're moving your lips. You're learning you're not taking a piece of paper and making a book out of it. Shetachas memshelas klipas neiga, which is under the klip of neiga. The nefesh habamis of the Jew is not from shol shlips atmeres, like he said in the first pair, comes from the klip of neiga, the neutral level that could be elevated. Nevertheless, Hakaimalon, we learn that the halacha is here to lav kadibudam. Again, this we learned last week, so we're not going to elaborate on it. If you read the siddur and you don't say the words, you do not get the mitzvah of davening. Because thought is not action. But a person does not fulfill their obligation of Shema, learning Torah, or davening until he verbally articulates it. He has to say it. The time alone we establish in halacha, verbal articulation is considered an action. In halacha, verbally saying something is an action. Therefore, and this is where we're up to from last week. He says like this. Because the godly soul itself cannot levate b'sasayim, to move the lips or the mouth, the lashon or the tongue, the shinayim gashmi, the physical teeth, because these are all the five forms of speech. You know, ki I de nefesh achiyunas habamis. The nefesh or kiss again is not giving life to the body. The nefesh habamis is. So what happens when a person learns Torah? They daven, they say the Shema, they're verbally saying something. The animal soul, which is verbally saying something, through the power of the godly soul that's giving him the life to be able to do the mitzvah, that is all becoming elevated because you just did an action with your mouth. That means your mouth is becoming elevated. Your mind is becoming elevated. And therefore, the more articulating you are, the louder you speak, with more chayis and life and so on. You're bringing into the learning more power of the nefesh achiyunis b'diburim elu. We all know that if you speak loudly, it takes more energy of your soul. So now if you're davening and learning and you're doing it loud with excitement and everything, then your nefesh habamis is more involved in the mitzvah because he has to move the lips more. You're talking louder. He has to use the voice more. So then what's happening? The nefesh habamis now is doing a mitzvah through the power that the godly soul gave to the animal soul to do the mitzvah. So then we're actually elevating our body. I'll answer that question in a second. It elevates not only your animal soul, but it elevates your body also. So somebody asked the question, what happens if it disturbs the people next to you? So then Shulchan Aruch says you're not allowed to daven loud. Okay? Well, we're talking when a person's by himself and they're davening and they're learning. Obviously not to disturb somebody else. But they get more excitement, more excited. And therefore they're using more energy of the animal soul. So the animal soul at that moment is becoming more elevated. When you do things emotional, with emotions, a mitzvah with emotions or intellect, and thought, speech, and action. So that's all the power of the nefesh habamis is getting elevated. And this is what he says. This is what the pasuk says. All my bones will declare. We say it as a pasuk in Tehillim, but we say it Shabbos before Shechanad. All my bones will say Hashem mi kamecha. Now, what does that verse mean? David HaMelech says in Tehillim, we say it in davening, may say tomorrow, all my bones will say Hashem bi kamecha, God who is like you. What type of bones is talking? The mouth talks. But it means, Alter Rebbe is explaining here, that when a person does mitzvahs with excitement, the whole body is involved. The whole body is involved in the davening. So when the mouth is saying, Hashem, who is like you, it's not only the mouth, the whole body is involved in it. And also he says, this is what Chazal tell us, the sages tell us, if the Torah is set in all the limbs, I'll explain in a second, then mishtameres, Torah is kept, you don't forget it. Im lav, ein mishtameres. And if it's not permeating your limbs, then you're going to forget it. Why? Shikha comes from klipas haguf and nefesh achiyunis habamis. Forgetfulness is evil. We're not talking about forgetting somebody did bad to you. That you're supposed to forget and forgive. We're talking now, if a person forgets learning. Why did they forget the learning? because it's not part of their very being. If Torah becomes part of your very being, you don't forget. Now, I'll give you a number of examples in this, which is very, very practical, and we can understand it very clearly from it. The tendency of people is when somebody does good for them, they seem to forget it very quickly. If somebody insults you or does something bad to you, you remember it for life. This is human nature. The good somebody does, we forget right away. The bad they did to me, they insulted me, or they hurt me, whatever it is, that we never forget. Why? The answer is very simple. When you get insulted, it touches you to the core. And your core doesn't forget things. Forgetfulness comes from evil. Therefore, we say in the Rosh Hashanah davening, and there is no forgetfulness by God. Why? Because something that touches the core, you don't forget. I'll give you another example, which is also very practical. A spouse forgets the spouse's birthday. That happens. They get very angry. The other spouse gets extremely angry. The question is, you never forget anything? But you forgot this. You never forget things. You're human, you forget. Why are you angry at your spouse that they forgot your birthday or anniversary here? If you forgot, it's equal for both of them. But why are you angry that usually the husband forgets? That he forgot. He's human, he forgot. You never forget anything. What's the answer? Why do they get so angry? It's very simple. If I matter to you, if you care about me, and you care about my birthday, you'll never forget it. Why did you forget something? You forget something, Dr. Rebbe says it here. Why do you forget? Because it's not important. Something important we don't forget. Shikha, forgetfulness, comes from klipas nega, evil. And therefore, he says, if you don't put your whole body into the learning and davening, you're going to forget it. Because that's human nature. Something you care about, you don't forget. Something you don't care about, you forget. So therefore, so what do you see from here, Dr. Rebbe says? When a person learns the davens, the body is functioning with the mitzvah. The animal soul is giving the vitality and life to the body in the mitzvah. So then what's the story? The story is, then that is being elevated to Kedusha. All of that is being elevated to Kedusha. And that's what he's saying. Okay, so therefore, Shikha, 3 lines in the end of this paragraph in Tanya. Shikha mi klipas haguf. Forgetfulness comes from the klip of the body. The nefesh achiyunis abamis in the animal soul, which comes from klipas nega, the neutral level of evil, and therefore the nichel pamim b'kedusha. Sometimes it goes into kedusha when you elevate it. Hanuk shematayish keichan, when they weaken the power of evil, and umachnis kol keichan, and they put all their strength in kedusha satera or davening. They put their strength into Torah and learning and davening and krishma, all that. Then they elevate the klipas nega to kedusha, and then you don't forget, because the klipas nega, your klipa is elevated to kedusha. So what's the Alter Rebbe saying over here? The Alter Rebbe is saying that this creation of the purpose of creation, which is dira b'tachtein, which is the ultimate purpose of creation, which he said in Perek Lamed Vav, will be when Mashiach comes, especially Tchias HaMesim. That is dependent on us. Why? Because when we do mitzvahs, we elevate the world. If we elevate the physical world And now the Rebbe says, even a mitzvah of speech, the fact that speech is action, so then we elevate our bodies, our souls, our animal soul. Every part of us becomes elevated. Now you have action mitzvahs that elevate the outside physical world, but this elevates our own self. We're talking about the truth is when a person thinks holy thoughts, they think thoughts of Torah, of doing kindness to another person, or whatever it may be, or meditating during davening. At that time, the thought of the person is also elevated. It's also bound with kedusha. And the Gemara says an interesting thing. I know I'm going off a little bit. The Gemara says, "Hirhuri aveda," thoughts of sin are worse than the sin itself. Why is that? So Chassidus explains very simply. The soul, the nefesh, godly soul, and the animal soul have three garments: thought, speech, and action. It says in Chassidus that the word Adam, man, mankind, Aleph is thought, Dalit is dibur, and Mem is ma'aseh. So it says Adam, a person, is thought, speech, and action. So the question is, why is thought called Aleph? You think about, he should have been called Madam, Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa, thought, speech, and action. Why is he called Adam? But Alter Rebbe explains that why is thought Aleph? Because thought is what's called the Levush HaMiyuchad, the united garment with the person. You can not talk, you cannot do, but you can never stop thinking. Even if you're not thinking, it's that you're thinking that you're not thinking. It says thought is constantly functioning. Why? It says in Chassidus that thought is one with the soul. Levush HaMiyuchad. It's the garment which is one with the soul. The soul constantly functions. Thought is constantly functioning. Therefore, a blemish in thought causes a deeper blemish in the soul than speech and action do. Even though we're not punished for thought, except idol worshiping if they can prove that you thought it. But we're not punished for thought because this is an action world. And you're not punished for action, usually even not for speech. But as far as a blemish on the neshama, because thought is closer to the neshama than speech and action, when you blemish thought, it's a much bigger blemish. When a person on the opposite side of the coin, when a person thinks and meditates in godliness, it's interesting. By Chassidim, you learn Chassidus and you're supposed to think the mimer. To close a book and think in your mind over the mimer that you learn, the discourse, is very difficult. It's very difficult. It's much more difficult than reading it and thinking it, and not reading with you, just reading it, because then the book is in front of you. It's very difficult to close the mimer, close the Tanya, whatever, and meditate on it. It's very difficult because thought is a very lofty, unique garment of the soul. So when a person does meditate in Kedusha, their thought system is getting elevated. Their brain, the intellect, is getting elevated. If the meditation causes a greater love and fear of Hashem, then the emotions are getting elevated. But here, the Alter Rebbe is talking about the elevating of the physical world. That's not through thought. Thought, you elevate your thought, which is very close to the soul. Speech is considered action. So when you do a mitzvah with speech, you're actually doing an action. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, not only are you elevating the physical world when you do a mitzvah, but when you do a mitzvah, even action mitzvahs for sure, but even verbal mitzvahs that you're doing, you are elevating the physical world. How? By elevating our physical animal soul and our physical body. We are elevating throughout the whole world. Like the Rambam says, in Hilchos Tshuva, is such a fundamental thing. The Rebbe keeps talking about it, and it's such a person needs to engrave this in our head. The Rambam says, there's a mission Sanhedrin that every person is obligated to say, Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam. The world was created for me. Why? The Mishnah says, Lama Nivra Adamichidi. Why did God create Adam? One man. He didn't create one ox. He created hundreds and thousands, whatever. He didn't create one blade of grass. Everything Hashem created in the world, he created multitudes. He created Adam and then Chava. And the Mishnah says, why did God do that? So the Mishnah says, because every person should say the world is created for me. I'm that individual. So some people take it literal and they're very egotistic. But the Rambam explains what the Mishnah really means, and it's so profound. The Rambam says, what does it mean the whole world is created for me? It means my action affects the entire world for good or, God forbid, for bad. And the Rambam gives an analogy of this. You should picture when you are about to do anything, okay? The world is an equally balanced scale. Good and bad are equally balanced. You're going to do one mitzvah, but I'm using the expression, machriya, you cause, you outweigh, atzma, yourself, but kol ha'olam, and the whole world for good. God forbid you do bad, one little aveda, because the world's equally balanced now. You're going to do one aveda, not only are you dragging yourself down, but you're dragging everybody, the whole world with you. So, Chassidus explained, you're about to do a mitzvah, realize what you accomplished by doing the mitzvah. You're elevating the physical object of the world. You're elevating your physical animal soul. You're elevating your physical body, which when you do a mitzvah is getting the life through the godly soul, and you're elevating the whole world. When you do a mitzvah, you're elevating not only yourself, not only your animal soul, your body, your godly soul, you're elevating the action, the world, the thing of the world. When a person does a mitzvah, let's say they light Shabbos candles, it's not that you're elevating that oil or candle that you lit. When a person doesn't start, when you light a candle, you are elevating all candles in the world. This candle is a representative of all candles. You're elevating this one candle for everything. You take a piece of wool and you make tzitzis out of it, the parchment, and you make mezuzah, film, whatever. You're actually elevating the entire inanimate plant, animal, and human. That means a person takes a cup of water, and if they're thirsty, they make a bracha. That elevates not only the cup of water that you drank, but it elevates all the water in the world. But he says, this is what a person, the Alter Rebbe is explaining why is dira b'tachtenim, which means that the world will be elevated to such an extent that the essence of Hashem will be there the essence of Hashem will be there. That is dependent on what we do. Because Hashem said, listen, guys, I created the world. Your job, make the world holy, i.e., make it my dwelling place. The world that I created unholy, you guys make it holy. So that's what Alter Rebbe is saying. The ultimate dina b'tachtenim is dependent on what we do, especially, Alter Rebbe says, in the time of Galus. So at the beginning of this chapter, for the duration of Galus. Why? Because in Galus, when it's darker and it's more difficult, and we're not in the mood of doing it, that's when the accomplishment is much greater. When the darkness is greater, the more light is appreciated. The more light shines during the darker night than it is when it's not so dark. The Gemara says it's Yerushalmi. Chassidus brings it down in reference to many things. There's an expression in the Gemara, Shraga b'tiya ramayhani. What does a candle do during the day? The candle doesn't do anything during the day. Why not? Because there's so much light, so what does a candle do? When does a candle shine brighter? When it's dark. That's when a candle comes into play. That's when a candle is very useful. That's when it lights the darkness. So Jews during Golus, doing Torah mitzvahs, accomplish much more than during the Beis Hamikdash when Jews did mitzvahs. Because there was light and they did mitzvahs. Very nice. It wasn't as difficult as it is today. When we have the difficulty and we still do a mitzvah, then that light is creating the dira b'tachtenim. We don't see it yet. But like we learned last week, it's like it's put into a box, it's put into a trust fund. The light is there, the reward is there, the godliness is there. The world is not worthy yet of redeeming the money yet. Mashiach will come. We'll see all the actions, all the elevation of the world that we accomplished for 2,000 plus years of Galus. Then we're going to see the accomplishment. And that's why taking the positive aspect of everything, the longer we're in Galus, of course, it's enough already. But the bottom line is, the more we're in Galus, the more we're able to accomplish. When Mashiach comes, it's too late. Godliness is there. Evil is removed. What are we doing? Now, Hashem is giving us more opportunity to connect to the essence of Hashem, because when it's darker, we connect more. And that's what the whole purpose of Torah mitzvahs in the time of Golus. And then the Alter Rebbe is going to continue about the blood, the veins of the person. It's remarkable what Alter Rebbe says. Okay, anyway, it's time. So once again, Monday night there's no class. Mitzvah Wednesday will be a class. So we'll see you then. Everybody have a great Shabbos, a great weekend.